Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. Today we're talking about when your kids get the cops called on you, which is something that you probably don't want to have happen.
That's accurate. So that's the provocative title to get you to click on the episode. So the background to the topic is I had a client come in who said that their kid went to school, and their kid told the school that his mom beats him with curtain rods and cuts him in the face with scissors.
Wow.
That was the very specific accusation. And then my client relays to me that no, none of those things were happening. But yet she also had DHS. Let's see what happened. DHS came to the school and or CPS, probably depending on which state you're in. Those words may mean different things to you.
Child Protective Services.
Yeah. Department of Human Services. Yeah, different depending on which part of the country you're in. You may hear those differently. But DHS came to the school and talked to the child. And actually, I will mention this now because I don't know if it's I don't know, maybe it's relevant. The school told the mom later on that that was a different story. It was the client was relaying to me, I think that was like her brother when they were younger, but it was the same situation. Mm-hmm. But the specifics that I was remembering from that situation was that the child had reported that their parent had like spanked them with a horse whip. That was the vocabulary used in that scenario. And the school checked the kid's bottom and had him pull down his pants so that they could check. Yeah, I see Eric's face, and there's a frowny face in that scenario.
Wow.
That's a separate CPS call on the school.
On the school.
That's what I told that client. I'm like, I think you counter-report on the school for that one.
Yeah, because they don't have the right to do that.
Right.
That would be the police intervention.
They just need to report it, but
they just need to report it, not
investigate it themselves.
Because the police, when they have whatever level they're going to do, they'll bring in a same-sex individual to do what they need to do. But then there also has to be, due to the age in different states, a parent can be present in different times, and it's sticky. Yeah.
So that was a really interesting kind of related to the topic additional piece of information that I heard from that story.
Right.
But then bringing it back to the one that was the client and their actual kid, that was their brother from many years ago. Let's see. DHS showed up at the school and talked to the kid. And then my client said the kid came home. This was like a couple of days ago. And like the kid was acting funny, right? Kind of like he didn't have the same normal presentation, and mom didn't know why. And kid didn't say anything. And then several days later, she gets a call from DHS kind of following up on the investigation. And they say, yeah, we talked to him on like Monday, and they'd gotten the call on like Thursday. And she goes, oh, well, that's why he's been acting funny all week. Yeah. Right? Because he talked to him and then didn't tell her. Let's see. And then what was the rest of the story? And I think that's the pertinent details in the story. Mm-hmm. And the client believes that the case is being closed, and because the kid didn't have scissor cuts on his face.
Yeah, to me,
or probably marks on other parts of his body.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the face is kind of like the easiest one to call out. Mm-hmm. I mean, the way that the kid reported it is like, my mom cuts me in the face with scissors. Like, really sounds like something that a kid would come up with. That's not a particularly like elegant story. Mm-hmm. It's like that one's super easy to like verify as not being true. But it just sounds like something a kid would say.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a problem in two fronts.
100%. That's a sticky situation.
Yeah, because on one hand, we want to listen to kids. And if they say something, you want to make sure that
because
you're
there's
not...
absolutely a problem of not listening to kids.
Yeah.
Right? That causes problems.
Right. And then on the flip side, especially with how things go, I could totally see in a case like what you're describing, like bad things happening and kids getting taken away from parents for things that never happened, just because as they do an investigation, depending on how competent the investigator is, you could end up with all kinds of things.
So as you're saying this, I'm also thinking about a family that I've worked with, and mom and dad were divorced. Dad had the children for the custody. Mom wanted to be back in the kid's life. It was all supervised. And she was not supposed to have alone time, as they had a person who was, approved by DHS to be there for one of the visits, and because dad couldn't be there.
Right.
And she basically strong-armed herself into having alone time with one of the kids, and basically told that kid that they needed to say that dad hit them and hits them, and that would help, her be able to see, the kids more often.
Oh gosh, that just adds an entire layer of complicated frosting to this cake.
Yep.
And it did, and it was, turned in, and the kids were removed from dad by DHS, and an investigation. They were placed with relatives, which that was one good part. Dad fully cooperated with the investigation, and fortunately, he had cameras at his house because of, his relationship with his ex-wife, and he's got 4 kids who, are very strong-willed, and so he has some different cameras. They talked to the other kids who said, no, this never happened. This never does happen. They were in DHS custody for, maybe a month before the investigation was finished, and the one child said, no, mom is the one who actually told me to say this, and they were able to verify some things.
Right.
But however this happens.
That is such a messy story.
It is. It's a real piece. And I remember when I was a kid, and I told this story in a different episode, where I wanted to be able to have the power over my dad. And his boss was there, and I did a little wincing at the table to try to make it look like my dad, beats me.
Right. That you had a flinch response to just everything.
Yes. Wow. And I thought that was because, I'm 9, I'm 10. I'm looking for the power that gives me the ability to do what I want. And really, that's where a lot of this comes from in those circumstances. And fortunately, my dad's boss knew him very well, and he had troubled kids of his own. And so he was able to see what was happening, as was my dad, and it never went any farther. But my dad had to, sit down with me and explain, do you have any idea what could have happened? Do you have any idea what?
I think that...
Yes.
And I was going to say the same thing. I think this is the takeaway to this episode mostly.
Right.
But keep going.
Yeah. Is that he described in detail, what it would look like in possibly someone else's home, a foster home.
Yep.
And the things that I loved, and the things that I wanted to have, and the freedom that I enjoyed, and the relationships that I had were all on the table if I had been able to be successful at that.
Right.
Not that I would gain more power, but I would lose so much more power in that whole situation.
Well, that was the conversation I was having with my client yesterday around does the child, you were talking that it was you in this story, and then, the client's child of does he realize what would happen? He wouldn't get what he wanted. He would probably be removed from the home, and then you said in that one story of the family that the children were removed from the home and placed with relatives, which you said was the best of a bad situation. But then sometimes that's not available, and you have to go into one of those DHS foster homes, which, as I told my client, the foster system, I'm glad it exists as a concept, but unfortunately there's bad things that happen inside of it. And even if nothing bad happens, you're removed from your family, and that sucks by itself.
Right.
And then you as a 9-year-old, and then the story that I was being told was a 7-year-old, they don't understand. And so from a parenting perspective, what your dad was saying, trying to communicate, if it is very clear that the child is telling tales for whatever reason,
right.
Trying to impart to them, this is really super serious, and you probably actually wouldn't like what would happen if you got the results of what you were attempting to do. Now, in this scenario for my client, she said she talked to her son and asked him kind of what's up, man? What's going on? Right. And his response was, I don't know. And so whether, was he being impulsive? What he wasn't able to express, and the mom wasn't able to suss out real clearly where this was coming from.
I feel
you're able to now as an adult go, I was trying to get power over my dad.
I was able to then as a kid.
Oh, you knew that.
Oh yeah. No, I know. I wanted what I wanted. And that goes back to the thinking of a child. It's in the emotional center. Right. They don't have big picture thinking. They don't have cause and effect thinking. We only think that once we put something in place, then things will get better the way we think they should go. But we have such a narrow vision of the world. You know, that's why my grandmother took me aside that one time and said, listen, I talked with your dad, but just understand, this is not a go-to. You do not get to keep coming to me, and I'm going to make the world change. This was a one-time thing, and I didn't even know she was going to talk to my dad. And that was just over finishing everything that, you know, I was served at dinner, you know, because that was not something that she raised her kids with. And she wasn't telling my dad that he needed to change it. She was simply pointing out there's some things I'm noticing that are affecting your son. And do you realize that? You know, and so she's bringing it back to my dad to logically think about with my mom. But it's one of these pieces where, because of how a child thinks, you really have to stop the world of a child in such a situation. For instance, with your client, if that was my kid and they're saying, I don't know, I would be like, well, okay, I can understand that maybe you don't know. I just need you to know things are going to stop and slow down to a halt for privileges or things we're doing, because obviously there's something serious here and we have got to get to the bottom of it. You know, so if this is coming from MTV, which, I mean, I'm just using MTV, it's not from streaming services, platforms such as Twitch or Switch.
Did you watch a thing that would inspire you?
Right. Did you watch the thing? Thank you for saving my sinking boat there. Or is this coming from, you know, your friends, or is this coming from, you know, where this is coming from? We got to figure this out.
Yeah. That's a really delightful, because obviously the balance here is your kids saying things that aren't true to DHS can cause major problems. We want to believe kids. We don't want to punish them for saying such things. But then the way you're describing it is very much like, well, I mean, it's kind of like the way we've talked about if your kid makes threats about like suicidal ideation or self-harm or I hate you, I'm going to kill myself, right? Like it's the same kind of response of, I care about you so much that we're going to focus on this.
Right.
And it's not going to be a punishment, but this is important. And we're going to do some things differently. And it might involve you not being on the internet just because I don't want you getting bad things from there.
And we still don't know what happened.
Right.
One of my teenage girls at one point, mom was like, I can't leave her alone at the house because she's doing cutting. Okay, and I'm not sure that she won't do other things. For instance, when she was younger, she always wanted to see what would happen when you stuck a butter knife into an electrical outlet. And even though she's a teenager, I'm not sure she won't do that. So I was able to turn to the teenager and said...
She was in the room at the time during the conversation?
Yeah, and I said, Sally, I've never had a Sally. So, Sally, what do you think about being left alone and a butter knife and the outlet? And she just looked at me and said, yeah, I can't say I wouldn't do it. I'm still curious. Okay. And so mom's
and that's a kid you need to intervene with differently than a different kid.
Exactly. And so it's not about punishment, but she needed to have more supervision. So one, not being left alone. Two, not being able to go off alone. And three, she had to come upstairs to be in the main room of the house. While we were trying to help her with these various types of struggles that she was having. And we did, and she was able to, gain freedom and move past it. But it wasn't punishment.
Right.
It was higher supervision per the need of the child at the time.
Right. I also feel like some of this falls into the category of, I feel like before I ever went on like my first time through an airport, my parents said, don't say certain words, don't do certain things.
Oh, don't
say certain words or
don't greet your friend Jack loudly. That's what
exactly.
It is,
Or don't yell fire and a thing. So there's like some level of like pre-education about this is a thing that people are looking for.
And definitely when you're 10 and you're in an airport, you think it'd be really funny to eat a bomb.
And you have to be explained, the consequences. Right. And so that, that is a piece. And then I think my other thing would be like kids, especially younger, like once they're told something or get something in their mind, sometimes it's hard for them to not continue to say that or believe that. So like our turning 3 soon, but he got up on the table or on a chair by the table, fell, got this little, injury. Mm-hmm. But the story that he says, you said, well, what happened to you? He says, mommy on the potty, Josiah table fall or something. And it makes it sound like he wasn't being watched at all, whatever. Okay. So then I asked my wife, like, she's like, no, that's not what happened at all. Because
you heard that story and your wife's like, no.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. She's like, no, I was moving laundry. And while I was doing that, he, jumped up on there. And so it's, what do you do about that? I mean, like if a kid's memory, especially if they're younger, is that just where you have to trust that the people that have heard this are going to understand that?
That's part of it. I mean, you have to understand that the kid's thinking overall isn't big picture and isn't cause and effect orientated, and it's emotionally driven. So is the child trying to gain some type of an attention towards, from reporting that? And because if they are, then accuracy to what really happened is not going to be a part of it. You're going to have maybe 7 parts accurate, 3 parts bad, and that makes the adult look bad.
Right.
Your son at his age doesn't have that full logical thinking, so it's going to be bits and pieces.
Right.
That per his age, which is very appropriate. You're going to hope that an investigator, if that's where that's at, will be able to put that together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of good investigators out there that can, they can really hear and establish that. I don't fault the kids because they are acting out of what they have for, their thinking. Mm-hmm. And what needs to happen is that the parents need to come in to help widen that thinking. I mean, I remember when I didn't like things at my house, we're in grade school, and I had set it up with a good friend. We were going to run away, and we were going to live in the forest, and we were going to build a community. And I don't know what we were watching on TV. That was, I say there was something on TV because we both had lists. I had lists of different tools we needed. She had lists of different food we were needed. We collected everything at our houses. And the downfall is I couldn't find my way back to her house. And even though I had studied it, but see, this is a good thing about me. I don't have a good sense of direction map-wise, street-wise. I will take wrong turns, but I'll always find my way to where I need to go. But I couldn't find enough of the turns to get to her house, and she got caught going out the window. My mom actually came looking, for me and found me. And my dad's intervention was that evening to bring 2 suitcases to my door of my bedroom and set them down, and he just made the straight proclamation: I do not want any of my children to live in an environment that they do not like. Do you need me to help you pack? And he walked away. And he just let that resonate. And now I'm looking at my stuff, and I'm looking at my things, and I'm looking at the house, and I'm thinking about, different things. I'm like, no, I don't need help. I'm not doing that again. And so you have to know your kid. And that was the right intervention for me. I'm not spreading that out, like peanut butter. That is not going to be the right intervention for some kids. But you have to know in the relationship with your child, what's the right intervention for your kid? What helps them get to think about these types of situations? Because you have to understand the basics. How they think emotionally. They don't have big picture thinking. It's going to be a fun thing that they're looking at. It would have been fun to be able to be on our own. Fun.
Well,
it wouldn't have.
Right. Like in the story that you're describing, it sounds like you were motivated by adventure, and your dad's intervention made you think about weight.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one thing that he went over at one point. What happens when your food runs out? How are you going to get water? What happens when you drink all your water? Yeah. And he's a survivalist, and so I took no time to be able to learn his ways. So, he knew that. But he could survive. I couldn't. And so, you're coming down to, let's talk about what happened. And, we really need to focus on this because obviously your emotions think that this would be a good thing. And you have no idea what this could have done. Because
that's the sentence that encompasses all of the varying kid behaviors we've mentioned this episode.
Oh, exactly. And there are kids that are trying to do those, types of, I'll turn you into DHS for a false thing to gain power over you.
Right.
And I totally get that. And, I totally understand that. I'm not saying that's a good thing because that in no way, shape or form, we put into the parenting manual, when kids have all the power, it only hurts kids. It only hurts them in the long run. So a kid, even though you're going to feel like this is great, I can do what I want. No, you're going to get to be an adult and realize, oh crap, how did that cost me? Well, now you're going to pay for it as an adult for the rest of your life. And that's not a good situation.
There was actually an intervention. Now that I don't know why I had forgotten this one. The idea, I think it was one of the other counselors that my client had talked to because their son sees someone as well. The idea of if you get the inkling that your child is of a persuasion where they might go to school and say things, maybe they're upset. Maybe they're the kind of kid who's trying to gain power over you, of pre-call DHS yourself and say, I have a kid who has maybe had this tendency. Maybe you've gotten reports from them before. They're going off to school in this state of mind. They might say something. I thought that was a really intriguing idea to kind of call them ahead of time yourself to try to kind of set up some expectations. Because I know that there's a strategy to that. Strategy is the wrong word. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But if you're the first person to call, you get the assumption of being the person who is in the right. And then if DHS gets the report of the parent called first to express a situation, that may shed a more positive light. So it's an idea anyway. And I thought it was an intriguing one.
That is an interesting idea.
I haven't heard. I mean, maybe it turns out to be a bad idea. Maybe it's one of those.
Yeah.
I heard it on the internet, and then somebody who actually knows something thinks it's a bad idea. But I am a big fan of tossing stupid ideas at the wall because sometimes they stick, and that one struck me as, yeah.
Well, it's an interesting concept. A parent calls and says, "Listen, my child, it looks like they're going to be, doing this at school." An investigator will log that down. And let's say the school calls and says, "Hey, yeah, the child said this." They're going to be looking for marks for one.
Sure.
So are you going to run into a bad adult who might use that to use that to their advantage? Well, you could.
You could, yeah. A nefarious person could try to cover up actual abuse. Sure, yeah.
Investigators, especially when they do these things, and I don't know all the laws in all the different states, but they include generally people who are pretty trained at different levels. So they show up, there's no marks. That's a good indicator that, maybe the parent was saying, the truth. And, now they can take it, the information from that angle. Versus if a parent actually did leave marks and then there's marks, then they're going to go, okay, maybe this is a parent who's just covering up, but we have marks.
Right.
You still have the part where a child could put the marks on themselves.
Oh, gosh.
And that does exist. And I've run into clients who they ran themselves into the wall and then said that, their parent did it.
Wow.
In some states like ours, that's really damning and really hard to be able to get around.
It will really engage the DHS system to act.
the police system too.
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, yeah. Interchanged.
Yeah.
Our title says the cops. We were thinking more about CPS, but obviously they're a related system.
And one of the big things is, being able to know your child, which means spend time with your child and build that relationship, because your biggest insulator against anything like this is your relationship and love that your child sees from you. My parents used some corporal punishment. Spanking was a part. It wasn't the only one, and it wasn't the main one. When I look back and assess my childhood, they never spanked me out of anger. They never spanked me in places where I'm like, I deserved that. I needed that. And they never spanked me as a way that I can say, yeah, they could have used something else. No, they knew me. And literally, I would be with my friends, grade school, middle school, and the impulse would hit me. And I would be like, oh, this would be so cool to do. No, it wouldn't. But we're kicking this idea around, and the idea would come across: is it worth a spanking? and I would sit there and evaluate it
because you knew your parents wouldn't approve.
Yes,
I think it's a cool idea, and I know my parents well enough to know they won't approve. And
so
sometimes children have bigger picture thinking than just the end of their nose.
Well, that's not bigger picture. That's just cause and effect on a small basis. Is it worth a spanking? And because I'm not thinking about what kind of damage it could do. I'm not thinking about how
That's why I said bigger, just a little bigger.
Barely bigger.
Just a little.
Bigger. Okay, we'll go with that. And so, I would go, yeah, guys, let's go play football. Most of the time. There are times where I'm like, maybe we can get away with this. Most of those didn't work, but it was that piece of thinking about that that really played a big part in the picture. Made me think about a comedian that I saw the other day, and he was talking about how, he grew up in an Italian community in New York. And one day, and he was talking about there is a healthy fear in a relationship with a parent and a child. There's a healthy fear. And he said, let me give you an example. I'm in middle school. We're at Central Park. Me and my friends, we light a fire. And we're just think it was fun. We're just trying to do something. Well, the police, shut it down. And
they didn't think it was such a good idea.
They didn't think it was such a good idea, as they wouldn't. And I'm in the back of a police car, and he's driving me away, and he goes, "Are you taking me to DHS?" And he said, the officer said, "No, I'm taking you to your dad." Could you please take me to DHS? My dad's gonna kill me. And he said, right there is a good example. That is a healthy fear for me to have. Because my dad obviously didn't kill me.
Sure. Yeah, I'm here talking to you.
But there was consequences to my behavior, and those consequences that helped me to learn what it is that I should not be doing in that type of situation, on my own with my friends out there. And so in the context of that relationship that the parent had built with the child, disappointing the dad and hearing what was going to happen in that relationship, going to jail would have been better.
His dad was scarier than the cops
at that time. Right, exactly. Which he has no idea what going to DHS would have been like either. But there's that, and that's kind of what we're looking at is, as you're building your relationship with your child, and when you get into a situation like this, and believe me, I'm thinking about the parents that say, but you don't know my kid, they're a strong-willed kid, and I'm going, I was that kid. And you can't give up on your kid. You just have to work with the relationship and make sure the consequences are in there, and make sure that they fit who your child is. And you have to be consistent and follow through. Because if my parents had not followed through, oh boy, that would have been a whole monster in another box.
So there's a lot of things you can do to try to prevent the police from showing up at your door or CPS or whatever. But kids will be kids, and they will say crazy things.
And your relationship with your kid is the best defense against any of those things, which It turns out we come back to that a lot.
Is a core theme.
Maybe we should do an episode on how to spend time with my kids.
Are you telling me to take notes?
That could be a good idea.
I'm fairly certain I actually may have that already, but I'll check my notes.
Yeah, check.
We'll get back around to it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the parent that says, you know what, I'm trying to do that, but my kid won't let me. And my immediate response is, you're the parent. Let's talk about that.
There's another one brewing. So make sure to subscribe if you are not, so that you can hear that next podcast, and leave us a comment. Let us know if you've ever had a situation like this or something similar that you've dealt with, and we will see you on the next episode.